Let's talk about the outlook for the sugar sector in Kenya, particularly given the news that we have around drought and also inflation numbers that came out today suggesting a jump to 14.1% and the general issue of prices in East Africa. In terms of the sugar industry, what are we looking at here?
Godfrey, a very, very good afternoon to you. It's really my pleasure to be at the studio today to talk about the sugar sector in Kenya. I will address it at three levels: at the global level, and the African level, and at the Kenyan level. We know that over the last 3 years, as opposed to previous years, when we had surpluses, we've had deficits of about 7 million tons, and this made the price of sugar jump from what it was, about $400 per metric ton, to the current level of $750 per metric ton. Africa is a deficit market, and so is Kenya. Kenya produces 540,000 metric tons against a consumption of 850,000 metric tons. And what we've seen in the last year is there's been more cane has been produced, and our production has increased from what it was 490,000 metric tons to the current year of about 540. And obviously, this has been supported by the very, very good rains we had in the last financial year, and the very, very good, the good international sugar prices made the local cane prices to be favorable, and hence we've seen a lot more farmers producing more cane. And from the reports we see, the cane production and sugar production is up on the previous year.
So what's the focus for this for this financial year for the Kenyan sugar industry? And then of course we can look at your company.
I think, I mean, as I mentioned before, that we do import about 35% of our imported sugar for local consumption. So
right.
Production this year is going to be 10% up on the previous year.
And for Mumias itself?
Mumias, the production, last year we did produce about 240,000 metric tons. We are looking at between 8 to 10% increase in total production.
Now, when I look at the overall sugar industry in Africa, as you said, Africa is a deficit continent in terms of sugar production. Surely that spells opportunity. What actions is your company taking to try and take advantage of the shortage, and the industry as a whole in Kenya? What measures are being taken to try and ensure perhaps that we move the equation the other way around?
I mean, one of the things we've done over the last few years is to increase our level of production. First of all, we rehabilitated our factory, and we've increased efficiencies by about 10 to 15%. And given the fact that there's still deficits, we are looking at acquisitions, as we know that a lot of the sugar mills in Kenya are owned by government. So, and they're being spun off through privatization. And Mumias is, we place ourselves in a position where we are looking seriously at acquiring one or two of the 4 mills that are being sold off by the government.
Yeah.
Secondly, that still will not be sufficient. We are looking at possibilities of starting greenfields, and we did a feasibility study for a greenfield operation at the coast. As we all know, Kenya, a lot of the factories are rain-fed, are on rain-fed, but we're looking at starting a greenfield which is down at the coast. It will be through, we'll do irrigation on the cane, about 16,000 hectares. We will produce about 200,000 metric tons. And I mean, we are fairly at an advanced stage of getting the final signatures on the dotted lines.
And in terms of the acquisitions that you're potentially looking at, are we just looking at Kenya? Are you looking also outside Kenya?
No, we are not limited to Kenya only. We are looking at the region as a whole.
And how big is that kitty that you're holding in your pocket, if I may probe?
I'm not at liberty, but I mean, the company is fairly liquid, so we can afford it.
Indeed. Let's talk about perhaps the actions of the government in trying to help develop the sugar industry in Kenya. Do you feel that the government is doing enough to grow the industry and ensure that the money that's being, if you like, wasted in importing all this sugar is actually used for more, for more useful purposes?
Actually, I mean, the government has come a long way because if you recall very many years ago, 10 years ago, the industry was more or less on its knees. But we've seen over the last few years through interventions of Kenya Sugar Board and funding, money has been put to increase productivity at the farm level and at the factory level. And given the fact that government probably does not have enough money, it's been agreed that through privatization, funds will be raised to rehabilitate these factories.
Yeah.
So we are seeing the government has responded very, very positively by agreeing to privatize so that private funds can flow for expansion, rehabilitation, and diversification. Because, you know, I mean, for this industry to be productive, it just doesn't have to be sugar. The industry has capacity of producing up to 340 megawatts of electricity. So far, it's only Mumias that is producing 40 megawatts of electricity and build associated ethanol industries as well.
But could the government be doing more, do you think, like, for instance, putting duties so that, you know, the country doesn't have to import sugar and you guys are encouraged to grow more?
I think that, I mean, yes, the government has done much, but it could do a little bit more by hastening the rate of privatization, because it's only through privatization that we'll get private funds flowing both for cane development and building of new factories.
But in terms of...
and also at the licensing level, I believe much could be done to reduce the red tape in licensing of sugar mills.
Indeed. Now, in terms of getting the industry to be efficient, you point out, well, one of the reports that I've read about the sugar industry in Kenya is that you face stiff competition from sugar that is imported from abroad. Now, why would it be cheaper to get sugar into Kenya than to grow it in Kenya and deliver it to Kenyans?
Incidentally, they differ. There are a number of trade regimes. Kenya is a member of the COMESA free trade. And I really don't think that is, that's a threat, because COMESA itself is a net importer of sugar. COMESA produces 4.8 million tons against a consumption of close to 6. So COMESA still has to import sugar. But we do know cases where sugar which come from non-COMESA countries like Brazil are transshipped through, and I mean, I refer to a case in point which has been appearing in Kenyan media recently, where sugar has been transshipped from Brazil through Egypt into Kenya as COMESA. And that obviously, because duties have not been paid, it ends up being cheaper.
Yeah. Now, one of the issues that's cited is a hindrance to the growth of the industry include labor, farm inputs, as well as transport. Now, in terms of addressing those, is enough coming from the government side to try to get the industry to have infrastructure that supports its development and also perhaps gets more companies into the sector and take away perhaps the role that's being played by small-scale farmers now?
Yeah, one of the inputs in the industry is fertilizer, and most of it is imported. It constitutes up to 20% of the cost of inputs. And continued importation of fertilizer obviously is not tenable for the industry. And I'm aware that the government, and we are at discussion with the government in terms of establishing local industries for fertilizer production. The second thing is organic sugar grown from through organic fertilizer commands twice the price. I mean, organic sugar at the world market is about $1,600 per ton. So we are looking at that probably going more the organic way. On transport, I mean, transport is fairly expensive. It constitutes between 20 to 25% in terms of the cost of cane. But Kenya is just as a victim as other countries to the vagaries of movements of the oil price.
Indeed.
So in terms of land preps, equipment that is used for cane, the government has done its bit by removing the necessary taxes. So probably the only other place is if the government could remove the taxes on fuels used in the sugar industry. Though I think that's a bit of a long shot.